The morning call to prayer echoed across Amman, as I adjusted my hijab and gathered my nursing bag. Dawn painted the limestone buildings in soft gold, the same colours that had framed my childhood in these hillside homes. I paused at our apartment window, watching the city awaken below while my mother's laboured breathing continued from the bedroom behind me. The sound had become my alarm clock over the past 6 months. Not the call to prayer, but that slight wheeze that meant another restless night for Mama. I counted the seconds between each breath, a habit I'd developed since her diagnosis. 12 seconds, 13, 14. Too long. My phone buzzed with a text from Omar. "Good morning, beautiful. How did your mother sleep? Still planning dinner with my family tonight?" I stared at the message, my chest tightening. Omar's family dinner. Another evening of careful smiles while his mother asked pointed questions about wedding dates and grandchildren. Another night of pretending I was ready for the life everyone assumed I wanted. "Karina, did you prepare the medication tray?" My father's voice carried from the kitchen, tired but steady. At 68, Baba had aged a decade in the past year, his broad shoulders now curved from the weight of watching his wife slip away piece by piece. "Yes, Baba. Everything is ready," I called back, checking my watch. 20 minutes until my shift at King Hussein Medical Center. The familiar weight of responsibility settled over me, like the humid Amman air before a storm. Caring for my aging parents, maintaining my nursing career, and navigating the increasingly complex expectations surrounding my 3-year relationship with Omar. I moved to the kitchen where my father stood hunched over his morning tea, steam rising from the glass in small, perfect spirals. His hands, once steady enough to repair the most delicate watch mechanisms, now trembled slightly as he lifted the cup to his lips. "You look tired, Habibti," he observed, his voice carrying the same gentle concern he'd used when I was 8 and afraid of the dark. "Did you sleep at all?" "Enough," I lied, not mentioning the 3 times I'd gotten up to check on Mama or the hour I'd spent reading by moonlight, searching for something I couldn't name in the pages of books that had once comforted me. "Omar called the house phone last night after you went to bed," Baba continued, his keen eyes studying my face. "He seemed worried that you haven't been responding to his messages about meeting his extended family." The guilt hit like a physical weight. Omar deserved better than my recent distance, my hesitation to commit to plans that felt increasingly like stepping into someone else's life. "I'll call him today," I promised, kissing my father's forehead, tasting the salt of his skin and the faint scent of the aftershave he'd worn for 40 years. "He's a good man, Karina," Baba said softly. "Patient, understanding. Your mother and I." He paused, his voice catching slightly. "We want to see you settled, happy. We want to know you'll be cared for when we're no longer here." The unspoken reality hung between us, like smoke. At 28, I was already considered late to marry by our community's standards. Every family gathering brought whispered conversations about why Omar hadn't proposed yet, why I seemed so hesitant to embrace this good man who clearly loved me. "I know, Baba," I whispered, my throat tight. "I know." The drive to the hospital took me through the heart of old Amman, past the Roman amphitheatre where tourists snapped photos and vendors sold fresh juice from wooden carts. The familiar sights usually grounded me, connected me to the long history of my city, my people. Today they felt like museum pieces, beautiful but somehow separate from my real life. King Hussein Medical Center rose from the hillside like a concrete prayer, its modern lines a stark contrast to the ancient stones surrounding it. I'd worked here for 6 years, since graduating from nursing school, and the rhythm of the place usually calmed my scattered thoughts. Today, even the familiar sounds, monitors beeping, phones ringing, the soft squeak of sneakers on polished floors, felt overwhelming. "You're late," observed Dr. Palais as I hurried to the nurses' station, fumbling with my ID badge. "That's the 3rd time this month." "I'm sorry, my mother had a difficult night," I explained. pulling up patient charts on the computer. The screen blurred slightly and I blinked hard, willing my exhaustion away. Dr. Palais's expression softened. How is she managing? Day by day, I said, the standard response that revealed nothing while saying everything. The morning passed in its usual blur of medications, vitals, and the small human dramas that played out in hospital beds. Mrs. Linak, recovering from gallbladder surgery, wept because her daughter lived in America and couldn't visit. Mr. Minup, admitted with chest pain, worried aloud about his shop being closed while he was hospitalized. During my lunch break, I escaped to the hospital's small garden, a pocket of green tucked between the main building and the parking structure. Layla found me there picking at a sandwich I had no appetite for. There you are, she said, settling beside me on the concrete bench with the dramatic sigh she'd perfected in nursing school. I've been looking everywhere for you. Layla had been my closest friend since our first day of clinical training, when we'd both fainted during our first surgery observation and bonded over our mutual humiliation. She was everything I sometimes wished I could be. Confident, decisive, perfectly content with the traditional path she'd chosen. Married at 24 to a banker, mother to 2 beautiful children, hostess of dinner parties that were the envy of our circle. Mariam and I are worried about you, she continued, unwrapping her own lunch with efficient movements. You've been different lately, distant. Even Omar seems concerned. I'm fine, I said automatically, the lie tasting bitter in my mouth. Don't give me that, Layla said firmly. We've known each other too long for polite lies. Something's wrong. Really wrong. You look like you haven't slept in weeks. I studied my friend's face, earnest, caring, genuinely worried. How could I explain the growing restlessness inside me, the feeling that I was sleepwalking through my own life? The questions that kept me awake at night, searching for meaning in prayers that felt increasingly hollow. My mother is dying, I said finally. Slowly. Every day she's a little more tired, a little more confused. And everyone expects me to just carry on, plan a wedding, have children, build a future while watching her slip away. Layla reached over and squeezed my hand, her grip warm and solid. That's why you need to get married soon. You need support, a partner to help you through this. But what if I'm not ready? What if I don't know who I am without all these responsibilities? Karina, Layla said gently, you're a nurse, a daughter, soon to be a wife and mother. What more identity do you need? Her words meant to comfort, only highlighted the emptiness I felt. Was that really all I was? A collection of roles and responsibilities with no inner life of my own. I've been reading more lately, I admitted, trying to understand things, spiritual things, God's purpose for my life. Layla frowned slightly. You pray 5 times a day. You fast during Ramadan. You follow all the requirements. What more understanding do you need? But that was exactly the problem. I'd been following requirements without feeling any personal connection to the God I claimed to worship. My faith had been inherited, cultural, routine. It provided structure but not meaning, obligation but not joy. I need to get back, I said, standing abruptly. My patients are waiting. The afternoon brought a new admission, an elderly woman named Mariam, who'd been found unconscious in her apartment by a concerned neighbour. As I helped her settle into bed, I was struck by the peace in her weathered face, despite her obvious frailty. Thank you, dear, she said as I adjusted her pillows. Such gentle hands. You have healing in your touch. Just doing my job, I replied, checking her IV line. No, she said, her clear eyes studying my face. This is more than a job for you. This is calling. But you're carrying something heavy. I can see it in your shoulders, in your eyes. I paused in my work, surprised by her directness. I'm fine, Mrs. Mariam. Are you? She asked gently. You look like someone searching for something but afraid to name what it is. Her words followed me through the rest of my shift, echoing in my mind as I drove home through Amman's evening traffic. The call to prayer was beginning as I pulled into our apartment complex and I sat in my car for a moment, listening to the familiar melody that had structured every day of my life. But tonight, instead of comfort, the ancient words felt like beautiful sounds in a language I didn't truly understand. Omar was waiting in our apartment lobby when I arrived, leaning against the mailboxes with the easy confidence that had first attracted me 3 years ago. Tall, well-dressed, clean-shaven, except for the carefully trimmed beard that made him look distinguished rather than religious. Everything a woman should want. "There you are," he said, pushing off from the wall to embrace me. I was getting worried. "Sorry, long day at the hospital." I returned his hug, breathing in the familiar scent of his cologne, mixed with the faint smell of the engineering firm where he worked. "How's your mother?" "The same. Maybe a little worse." I pulled back to look at his face, handsome, concerned, patient. Why didn't I feel the flutter of excitement I thought I should feel when I saw him? "And how are you?" he asked, his voice carrying a note I hadn't heard before. "Really? Not the polite answer you give everyone else?" The question surprised me. In 3 years of dating, our conversations had been pleasant, predictable. We discussed our jobs, our families, our plans for the future, but we'd never talked about feelings, about doubts, about the questions that kept me awake at night. I started, then stopped. How could I tell him about the restlessness growing inside me? The sense that everyone else knew the script to my life except me. "Can we skip dinner with your family tonight?" I asked instead. "I need to talk to you. Just us." Something in my tone made him study my face more carefully. "Of course. Let me call my mother." We walked to a small cafe near the university district, a place where students huddled over textbooks and young couples shared dessert and whispered conversations. The kind of place where we could talk without running into family, friends, or neighbours who would want to know when we were getting married. Omar ordered tea for both of us, adding sugar to mine without asking, a small gesture that showed how well he knew my preferences. But did he know anything else about me? Did I know anything about him beyond the surface details we'd shared? "Talk to me," he said once we were settled in a corner booth. "What's really going on?" The kindness in his voice broke something loose inside me. "I feel lost," I whispered, surprised by my own honesty. "Everyone knows what I should want, what I should do, who I should be, but I don't know what I actually want." Instead of the dismissal I expected, Omar leaned forward. "Tell me more." So I did. For the first time in our relationship, I shared my real thoughts, my restlessness, my questions about faith, my fear that I was living someone else's life. I told him about lying awake at night wondering if there was more to existence than the careful routine I'd built. I confessed that the thought of marriage, even to him, sometimes felt like stepping into a beautiful prison. Omar listened without interruption, his dark eyes fixed on my face. When I finally ran out of words, he was quiet for a long moment. "Why haven't you told me any of this before?" he asked. "Because I thought you'd think I was ungrateful, foolish. Every woman in Amman would be happy to have what I have." "But you're not every woman in Amman," he said quietly. "You're Karina. And Karina is thoughtful, questioning, seeking something deeper than surface happiness." I stared at him. "You're not upset? Upset that the woman I love has a seeking heart? That she wants more than just going through the motions?" Omar shook his head. "Karina, my grandfather used to say that questions are the beginning of wisdom, not evidence of weakness." "But everyone expects us to get married. Your family, my family, our friends, they all assume—" "Forget what everyone else expects," Omar interrupted, his voice firm but gentle. "What do you want? Not what you think you should want. What does your heart actually tell you?" The question hung between us like a bridge I was afraid to cross. "I want to know who I am before I become someone's wife. I want to understand my faith instead of just practicing it. I want to feel connected to God, not just obedient to rules." Omar nodded slowly. "Those don't sound like unreasonable wants. Don't they? Everyone else seems to have it figured out. Layla never questioned anything. She got married, had children, and she's perfectly happy." "Are you sure about that?" Omar asked. "Or is that just what she shows the world?" The question startled me. I thought about Layla's perfect dinner parties, her Instagram photos of family outings, her confident advice about marriage and motherhood. Had I ever seen her vulnerable, uncertain? Had I ever really asked? "I've been reading different books lately," I admitted. "Religious texts, philosophy, even some Christian writings, trying to understand what different people believe about God's purpose for our lives." Omar's eyebrows rose slightly. "Christian writings? I know it sounds strange, but some of their ideas about having a personal relationship with God, it's different from what I was taught growing up." I braced myself for his reaction, expecting shock or disapproval. Instead, Omar looked thoughtful. "My grandmother used to talk about God like she knew him personally," he said quietly. "Not as a distant judge, but as someone who cared about her daily struggles. I always wondered what that felt like." "Really? Really? I've done my share of questioning too, Karina. I just haven't been brave enough to voice it to anyone." We talked until the cafe began to empty, sharing thoughts and doubts we'd never expressed to anyone. I learned that Omar had been reading philosophy and theology in his spare time, wrestling with many of the same questions that plagued me. He told me about watching his grandmother face death with a peace that seemed to come from somewhere deeper than resignation. "I used to think faith was about following the rules perfectly," he said. "But watching her faith wasn't about rules. It was about relationship." "Relationship with who?" "With Jehovah and his son, Jesus. Not as someone waiting to punish mistakes, but as someone who loved her completely." Walking home through the quiet streets, a sense of kinship rolled through me. I felt something I hadn't experienced in months. Hope. Not hope for answers to all my questions, but hope that I wasn't alone in asking them. "Where does this leave us?" I asked as we paused outside my apartment building. Omar took my hands in his touch warm and steady. "It leaves us with honesty, which is more than most couples have when they get married. But the expectations, the pressure from our families, will still be there tomorrow," he acknowledged. "But maybe we can face them together instead of separately." Over the following weeks, Omar and I began talking in ways we never had before. We met for coffee after his work, took long walks through the old city, spent hours discussing everything from childhood dreams to spiritual longings. I discovered a depth to him I'd never suspected. A man who thought deeply about justice, who questioned traditional gender roles, who wanted to build a marriage based on mutual respect rather than cultural expectations. "I don't want you to give up your career when we marry," he told me one evening as we sat in the Roman amphitheatre, watching the sunset paint the ancient stones gold. "I've seen what you do at the hospital. You have a gift for healing that shouldn't be wasted." "Most men wouldn't feel that way." "Then most men are fools," he said simply. "Why would I want to marry someone and then ask them to become less than who they are?" The conversations weren't always easy. We disagreed about some things, challenged each other's assumptions, pushed back on ideas that felt too comfortable or too conventional. But through it all, I was coming alive in ways I'd forgotten were possible. 3 months after our first real conversation, Omar proposed. Not at a fancy restaurant or in front of our families, but during one of our evening walks through downtown. We'd been discussing a book he'd given me, a collection of poetry by Rumi that explored the soul's longing for divine connection. When he suddenly stopped walking. "Marry me," he said simply. "Omar." Not because our families expect it, not because we've been together long enough, but because I want to spend my life discovering God's purpose with you. Because I want to support your dreams, whatever they turn out to be. Because I can't imagine exploring all these questions with anyone else. I looked at this man who'd become my best friend, my intellectual equal, my partner in seeking truth. Yes, I said, meaning it with my whole heart for the first time. The engagement period was everything I'd hoped it could be. Omar proved to be the partner I'd never dared to imagine, supportive of my career, interested in my spiritual questions, genuinely excited about building a life together. We planned a wedding for the following spring, giving us time to prepare properly and for my mother to hopefully stabilise. But my mother's condition continued to deteriorate through the winter. The cancer we'd been fighting quietly for 2 years suddenly accelerated, spreading faster than the doctors had predicted. By February, she was spending more time in bed than out of it, her meals becoming smaller, her conversations shorter. "I want to see you married," she told me one afternoon as I helped her with her medications. Her hands, once steady enough to embroider the finest stitches, now shook as she tried to hold her water glass. "You will, Mama," I promised, though privately I shared her fears. "Move up the wedding," she said suddenly. "Don't wait for spring. I might not—" She didn't finish the sentence, but we both knew what she meant. That evening I called Omar with a heavy heart. "We need to talk about the wedding date." "I'll be right over," he said immediately. When I explained my mother's request, Omar didn't hesitate for a moment. "Then we'll move it up, whatever she needs." "But your family has already sent invitations. The venue is booked for April. It would be such chaos to change everything." "Karina," he interrupted gently, taking my hands in his, "family is more important than perfect planning. If your mother wants to see her daughter married, then we'll make it happen. Everything else is just details." Within a week, Omar had rearranged everything. The wedding was moved to 6 weeks away, a logistical nightmare that he handled with patience and efficiency. His mother, initially upset about the disruption to her carefully laid plans, softened when she understood the reason. "Your husband-to-be has a very good heart," my mother observed one afternoon as Omar helped my father organise her increasingly complex medication schedule. "He'll take good care of you." As the new wedding date approached, the intensity of planning combined with my mother's deteriorating condition left me exhausted and emotionally raw. I found comfort in unexpected places, late-night conversations with Omar about faith and meaning, quiet moments of prayer that felt more honest than they had in years, and a small Arabic Bible I'd discovered at the back of a used bookstore. The Psalms, in particular, spoke to something deep in my heart. The raw honesty of David's prayers, his willingness to bring his real emotions to God, felt revolutionary after a lifetime of formal ritualized worship. "Listen to this," I told Omar one evening, reading from Psalm 42. "As the deer pants for streams of water, so my soul pants for you, my God. My soul thirsts for God, for the living God." "That's beautiful," Omar said. "Who wrote it?" "King David, a Jewish king who lived thousands of years ago. But it sounds like he felt the same spiritual hunger we've been talking about." Omar was quiet for a moment. "Do you think it's possible to feel that connected to God, to experience faith as desire rather than duty?" "I'm starting to think it might be," I admitted. "Some of these ancient prayers, they feel so alive, so personal." 2 weeks before our wedding, while I was working a late shift at the hospital, disaster struck from an unexpected direction. I was checking on Mrs. Mariam, the elderly patient who'd become something of a fixture in our cardiac unit, when Dr. Palais appeared in the doorway, his expression grim. "Karina, I need you to come to my office immediately." I followed him through the hospital corridors, my mind racing through possible explanations. Had I made a medication error? Missed something important in a patient's care? Dr. Palais closed his office door behind us and gestured for me to sit. "Someone has made a serious accusation against you," he said without preamble. My blood ran cold. "What kind of accusation?" "They claim you've been reading Christian materials and questioning your Islamic faith. They've suggested you might be converting to Christianity." The room seemed to tilt around me. Who said this? "I can't reveal the source, but the accusation has been made formally in writing. I need to know if there's any truth to it." I thought about the Bible in my locker, the conversations with Omar about seeking deeper spiritual connection, the hours I'd spent reading Psalms and finding comfort in their ancient words. I've been reading religious texts, I said carefully, trying to understand my faith better. Christian texts. The question hung between us like a sword. Among others, yes. Dr. Palais's face hardened. Karina, do you understand what you're saying? You're 2 weeks away from marriage. Your reputation, your family's reputation, your fiancé's reputation. All of this is at stake. If word spreads through the community that you're involved with Christianity... I'm not converting, I said quickly. I'm just trying to understand different perspectives on faith, on God. Understanding is one thing, Dr. Palais replied sharply. But reading Christian scripture, in our community, you know what that looks like to people. He was right, and we both knew it. In Amman's conservative Muslim community, even the appearance of interest in Christianity could be socially devastating. Clean out your locker tonight, Dr. Palais continued. Remove any questionable materials, and I strongly suggest you have a conversation with your fiancé before this goes any further. I left the hospital that night feeling like I was walking through a nightmare. Someone, who, had been watching me closely enough to notice my reading habits. Someone had cared enough to make a formal complaint. Someone wanted to destroy my reputation just days before my wedding. The next morning, my phone started ringing before dawn. Relatives I barely knew, family friends, even acquaintances from the neighborhood. All demanding explanations for the rumors that were spreading like wildfire through our community. Is it true? My father asked when I finally emerged from my room, his face grey with shock and worry. Are you reading the Christian book? Baba, I'm searching for truth, for a deeper connection with God. Isn't that what faith should be about? This will destroy us, my mother whispered from her wheelchair, where she sat wrapped in blankets despite the warm morning. Your wedding? Your reputation? Everything we've built. How could you be so careless? By afternoon, the whispers had become a roar. Someone claimed they'd seen me purchasing the Bible. Someone else said they'd witnessed me in suspicious conversations with known Christians at the hospital. The truth became irrelevant as gossip took on a life of its own. Omar arrived at my apartment that evening, his jaw set in a way I'd never seen before. He'd clearly been fielding calls all day, and the strain showed in the tight lines around his eyes. We need to talk, he said. My heart sank. This was it. The moment he would realize that marrying me had become too complicated, too scandalous for his family to bear. I'd fallen in love with a man who encouraged my spiritual questioning, but now that questioning had become a public embarrassment. I understand if you want to call off the wedding, I said before he could speak. I know this isn't what you signed up for. Omar stared at me for a long moment. Call off the wedding? Why would I do that? The rumors, the embarrassment to your family, the damage to your reputation. Karina, sit down. His voice was firm but not unkind. I want you to listen to me very carefully. I sank onto our living room sofa, bracing myself for the inevitable rejection. This afternoon I received 23 phone calls about you, he began. 23 people felt they had the right to tell me what kind of woman I'm marrying. Do you know what I told them? I shook my head, not trusting my voice. I told them that I'm marrying a woman who seeks God with her whole heart. I told them that her spiritual hunger makes me love her more, not less. And I told them that if they have a problem with my fiancé's sincere desire to know God better, they're welcome to skip our wedding. Tears spilled down my cheeks. But your mother, your career. My mother raised me to judge people by their character, not by gossip and rumors. She knows what kind of person you are, and my career will survive just fine. What if the rumors are true? I whispered. What if I am finding answers in unexpected places? Omar knelt in front of me, taking my hands in his. Then we'll figure it out together. That's what marriage means. Walking through life's questions as a team, not abandoning each other when things get complicated. The relief I felt was so overwhelming I could barely breathe. I thought you'd be ashamed of me." "Ashamed of you? Karina, I've watched you care for your dying mother with grace. I've seen you work double shifts to help colleagues who are struggling. I've heard you ask the deepest questions about life and meaning that anyone can ask. How could I be ashamed of someone like that?" The next day, Omar did something that shocked everyone who knew him. He called a gathering at his family's house, inviting both our families and the most influential members of our social circle. I wanted to hide, but he insisted I be there. Standing in his parents' spacious living room before nearly 40 pairs of eyes, Omar addressed the crowd with a quiet authority I'd never seen him display. "There have been malicious rumors circulating about my fiancé," he began, his voice carrying clearly through the sudden silence. "Let me be absolutely clear. Karina is a woman of exceptional character who has dedicated her life to caring for others. She is a devoted daughter, a skilled nurse, and a sincere seeker of truth. If her spiritual curiosity threatens anyone in this room, the problem is not with her. It's with you." The silence that followed was deafening. I could feel the discomfort, the shifting in seats, the sideways glances between relatives and family friends. "Furthermore," Omar continued, his voice growing stronger, "I will not tolerate anyone spreading gossip about the woman I've chosen to marry. Karina's questions about faith and meaning make her more faithful, not less. Her search for a deeper connection with God is exactly what our community should be encouraging, not condemning." One by one, I watched the troublemakers back down. Omar's defense of me was so forceful, so uncompromising, that the rumors began to lose their power in the face of his certainty. "If you cannot support our union with respect and kindness," Omar concluded, "you are not welcome at our wedding. We want to be surrounded by people who celebrate love and authenticity, not by those who traffic in gossip and judgment." As the crowd dispersed, several people approached me with apologies. Others remained distant, but the immediate crisis had passed. Omar had not only defended me, he'd redefined the narrative entirely. We married the following week in a ceremony that was smaller than originally planned but filled with genuine love and support. My mother, weak but radiant in her wheelchair, watched with tears in her eyes as Omar and I exchanged vows that felt more meaningful after everything we'd weathered together. "I promise to support your search for truth," Omar said during our personally written vows, "to explore life's deepest questions with you, and to love you not despite your spiritual hunger, but because of it." "I promise to share my journey with you," I replied, my voice steady despite my tears, "to trust you with my doubts as well as my certainties, and to build a marriage based on authentic love rather than social expectations." 6 months later, my mother passed peacefully at home, surrounded by family. In her final weeks, something beautiful had happened. The crisis of the rumors, rather than driving us apart, had sparked deeper conversations in our family about faith, meaning, and what it truly meant to seek God. "I want to understand what gave you such peace during all that upheaval," my mother had said one afternoon during her last month. "Teach me about this spiritual searching you've been doing." Those conversations, gentle and exploratory, opened doors I'd never expected. My mother began asking questions about the Bible I kept on my bedside table, about the difference between following religious rules and having a personal relationship with God. Omar, too, had been transformed by our shared crisis. "If reading Christian scripture helped you find peace when everything was falling apart," he told me, "then maybe there's something there worth exploring." A year into our marriage, we'd begun attending a small, discreet gathering of believers, both former Muslims and Arab Christians, who met weekly for prayer and Bible study. The group was led by a Palestinian couple who'd navigated their own complex journey of faith and cultural identity. "Faith isn't about changing your culture or rejecting your family," the wife explained during our first visit. "It's about finding the personal relationship with God that your heart has been seeking all along." Sitting in that room, holding Omar's hand as we listened to testimonies of transformation and belonging, I felt a peace I'd never experienced. This wasn't about rejecting everything I'd been raised to believe. It was about fulfilling it in ways I'd never imagined possible. The night I finally surrendered my life to Jesus, Omar was beside me. We knelt together in our apartment, both of us ready to embrace the faith that had been calling to our hearts through all the questions, all the searching, all the uncertainty. "I choose you, Jesus," I whispered, tears streaming down my face. "Not as a replacement for everything I've known, but as the completion of everything I've been searching for. You are the answer to the spiritual hunger I've carried my whole life." Omar's own prayer echoed mine, his voice thick with emotion as he acknowledged Jesus as his Lord and Saviour. "Thank you for loving us enough to let us find you through our questions rather than despite them." 2 years later, we've learned to navigate our new faith within our complex cultural context. It hasn't been easy. Some family members remain uncomfortable with our choice, and we've had to be wise about when and how we share our testimony. But we've also discovered a community of believers who understand the particular challenges of following Jesus in the Middle East. Our marriage has become a source of strength rather than constraint, two people walking together toward a truth that sets us free. I still work as a nurse, still care for patients with the same dedication I always had, but now that care flows from a different source, not from obligation or cultural expectation, but from the love of Christ that fills my heart and overflows to others.